Welcome to the Chai Center and welcome to the Chai Academy. This is Rabbi Sachs, and we've been doing this for some time now. It was born out of COVID, where we give classes on different topics of interest. We just finished a pretty long course on the Holocaust, and we just started fascinating Jewish personalities. So this is the third fascinating personality. The first one was Eli Wiesel. The second one was Leo Frank. And now, today's class is going to be on an incredible woman. Her name is, there's different pronunciations to her name. It's Hanna Zener or Hanna Szennesh. And an incredible person. She was, aside from having a very short life, as we'll talk about, she was a poet. She was very prolific. She wrote down many things in her short life, but she was a heroine. She was a person who truly died al kiddush Hashem, meaning she died as a martyr, as a holy martyr. Not just, martyrs can be unholy as well. She died as a martyr, and she died as a holy martyr, and she died sanctifying God's name, as the story will be told. She was born in somewhere in July 1921, and she was born in Hungary. So this was, World War One was over, and she was born, in between. Her father, she lost her father, who was a journalist at a very young age, and she was brought up with her mother, Catherine, and hi Hazel, and Catherine, this was in Hungary, and there weren't necessarily any good Jewish schools, and they were very extremely secular people. And so Catherine sent her to a Protestant school. Now, it's interesting, the Protestant school accepted all denominations. They accepted Jews, accepted Catholics, accepted whoever wanted to pay. However, if you were Protestant, you paid one price. If you were Catholic, you paid another price. And if you were Jewish, you paid triple the price of a Protestant. Hanna Szennesh, good stock. And anyway, it was very difficult to pay. But went to private school, and you wanted to have a good education, etc. And the mother paid. The mother paid triple. Once the mother realized that Hanna was a prodigy, brilliant, she went over to the school and said, "Listen, it pays for you to have her, but you got to reduce the price. She's an asset." So they struck a deal where she paid double the price and not triple the price. So while she was young, she learned all about anti-Semitism. She felt anti-Semitism. I mean, Hungary is not exactly a bastion of Jew lovers. Never was, never will be. And she joined a Zionist party. She joined the Young Zionist movement, and at a tender age of 18, in 1939, she emigrated to British-mandated Palestine, which is, of course, we call it Israel. So she was an avid Zionist, and she said she wanted to go to Israel. So she went to Israel, and she actually went to school in Israel, and at 19 or 20, somewhere between 19 and 20 years old, she joined a kibbutz in Haifa. And while she was at the kibbutz, this famous kibbutz, where she joined the Haganah. So the Haganah, once again, with freedom fighters. The Haganah was, the Lehi were vigilantes. The Haganah eventually became the IDF. So it was more of the established branch of of the of freedom fighters. But Lechi, with and Gun and Haganah, we discussed this in our modern day Israel class course, which I highly recommend, if I may say so myself. So she joined the Haganah, and and she was all about supporting Israel. And because Israel that time was ruled and run and governed by the British, at 22 she enlisted into the WAAF, which stands for the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, which was it was the women's part of the Air Force. And by the way, the British Air Force, the amount of women that joined, there were thousands of women that joined this Air Force. They had like a couple hundred recruits a week. And she was in Israel, so she joined the WAAF in Israel, in British mandated Palestine. A short while later, she was chosen to be an SOE. An SOE stands for a Special Operations Executive. It was one of Britain's closely held top secret positions that they held, is that they recruited essentially spies. And these spies were to go from Britain or wherever else Britain had a handle in, and fight Nazis clandestinely. So we had the British Army, which was the open warfare, and then you had the SOE. So she was on March 14th. The date is important. March 14th, 1944. She parachuted into Yugoslavia, and she parachuted a bunch of people, a bunch of the SOEs, parachuted, and the purpose was they parachuted into Yugoslavia to make it into Hungary, and try and sabotage Nazis' presence there, and also try and save Jews. Because remember, Hungary was one of the last places to fall in terms of Jews. So to try and save Jews. There were preparations were underway, and it was top secret, etc. When they finally parachuted on the 14th, unbeknownst to them at that time, Hitler and the Germans had already invaded Hungary on March 12th. So when they finally landed in Hungary, they were in a forest, and they caught up with partisans, these private underground guerrilla armies, etc. And they heard that Hungary is now occupied. Much of the unit said, "We're not going in. It's too dangerous. They knew that the Nazis were trying to occupy it, but it wasn't a done deal. They know the Nazis had a lot of influence in Hungary, but it was not a done deal. And once they found out that it was happened, most of these SOEs said, and there was very few women, by the way, they decided they dropped out, and Hanna, together with two other males, decided to forge ahead and try and sneak in from Yugoslavia into the Hungarian border. Unfortunately, all three were caught. What happened next, we'll talk about Hanna first. So what happened next is that Hanna was grabbed. She was strapped to a chair, and she was mercilessly beaten. She lost all her teeth except for the molars in the back. She was no food, no drink, just beaten. What they were beating her for was, she had a transmitter, but it was coded. So they were beating her for the codes, and she would not give it up. They separated the three hostages, or the three captives, or the three Jews, and they beat her to a pulp. She would not give it up. So then the next terror tactic they tried is they arrested her mother, and they brought her mother to her. They said, you don't give up the codes, she dies. So Hanna said, Now remember, if she would have given up her codes, they could have set a very large trap for the SOE, for the underground, for the partisans, for, it would have been a big fiasco. And so they brought her mother, and they said, codes. So she said, Hanna, Szennesh, codes, Hanna, Szennesh, codes, Hanna, Szennesh. And they beat her and beat her. And they did not, they didn't kill the mother, but that's what they threatened. Now, so Hanna and the two guys. The two men. It's interesting. The two men ended up being saved. Both of them. One escaped. They were sent. They were put on a train. One of them jumped from the train, but the reason why they weren't killed is because a fellow by the name of Rudolf Kastner got involved. And Rudolf Kastner, who we've spoken about, and once again in modern day Israel, about the trial of Rudolf Kastner. I believe there's a movie made about him and the eventual assassination of Rudolf. Rudolf Kastner was a complicated individual. His granddaughter is a member of Knesset, but he was a complicated individual. And at his trial, actually, Hanna Szenesh's mother condemned him. But Rudolf Kastner got involved with the two guys and met with the two guys and told the two guys, look, tell the Germans that you are part of the Kastner ploy and the Kastner-Eichmann ploy and negotiation of blood for goods. What Kastner did is that he made a deal. He struck a deal with Eichmann, who Eichmann, by the way, many times sabotaged the deal. But the deal was, I'll give you $1,000 US dollars per head of any Jew that you save. And Kastner chose them. Kastner chose who he wanted to save. He saved very, very prominent people. He saved people also who gave him money. So he bid it out to the wealthy, and he actually charged the wealthy more, double, so that he can try and save someone who's not wealthy. So it's a very, very complicated, and there's a lot of finger pointing at Kastner. He was eventually killed, assassinated on the streets at midnight one after he was exonerated at trial. He wasn't fully exonerated, but anyway, so he managed to get involved for the two guys, but according to Hanna Szenesh's mother at the trial, said that you told me, Mr. Kastner, Reisha Kastner, but Rudolf Kastner, you told me, don't hire lawyers, you'll take care of it. He says, I don't know what to blame you more, Mr. Kastner. Whether you let my daughter die, you're indifferent, or you subconsciously killed her. But the two guys did live, and it's part of the controversy. Anyway, in October of 1944, she was tried, held for treason in Hungary. And it was pushed off the trial because they wanted to give judges more time to hear, and they brought in a new judge who they felt would be better for the Germans and less better for Szennesh, and eventually in November of 1944, she was executed by a firing squad. While she was in prison between October 44, and while she was in prison, actually, from when they caught her in March of 44, after those 3 days, she used to use a mirror. They say that she was so creative, so brilliant, that she used a mirror to talk to other prisoners, using the Morse code with sunlight. She also she cut out letters herself out of cardboard and used them to communicate. She also, they used to find Magen David, Star of David's, in the sand, in the earth, and it said that was her. She also kept a very accurate diary of what exactly happened to her, which was eventually brought to light. Anyway, so in October 44, she was killed, and she was finally brought to rest in Jerusalem, in Mount Herzl, in 1950. In 1993, after the Cold War ended, she was exonerated, and she was no longer considered a convict, a fugitive, a traitor, a treason. She was, and the family were notified in 1993. In the year 2000, they brought her tomb to Haifa, to the kibbutz, that's where she started with her original training. But she wrote. There's a book of poems of Hanna Szennesh. There's a book, by the way, called Perfidy by Ben Hecht. I've mentioned him before. Ben in the book, based on footnotes and based on Hannah's mother and based on Rudolf, the trial of Rudolf Kastner, he blames Kastner. He blames Ben Hecht blames Ben Gurion for being indifferent to the plight and to the life of Hanna Szennesh. He really puts it at Ben Gurion's feet, and Kastner was part of the Pie Party, and Ben doesn't like either of them. And he said that Hanna Szennesh was a woman ignored. She wrote songs, she wrote poems that over the years has become basically a Zionist part of the Zionist manuscript. In schools they teach her poems and they read her poems. Many famous artists of Ofra Haza has written tunes. And Shlomo Shabbat, I believe, has written tunes. One of the famous tunes is the Walk to Caesarea. It's called Kaylee Kaylee. But there's poems, there's songs, there's as I said, she was very prolific, and there's also many. They have much communication. Remember, she died. This girl died she was barely 23, I think, when she died. 23 in a few months, and there's much communication between people, who really adored her, and from a couple of her lovers. There was a professor, I forget his name, but there was a lot of correspondence there. How he was just infatuated, he was smitten with her, and the correspondence of what he wrote about her, etc., etc. Truly, a someone who died at Kiddush Hashem. Truly, a martyr in the highest regard. Sad and tragic, but she will always be remembered. And remember, she I think bigger, stronger, tougher men, myself included, myself especially, would have folded under such torture, 3 days of torture, and given up the codes. She did not. She was truly a heroine. So while the Leo Frank was killed unfairly, so, and he's a martyr, the distinction here is that Hanna Szennesh was not only a martyr, she was a heroine. She was she died al Kiddush Hashem. They say you cannot get to heaven quicker than that. So Hanna Bat Katarin, we bless you with a lichtige Gan Eden. We bless you with a world to come that's full of light, and may we hope and pray that we're living up to your expectations. Thank you and your honorable family for everything you did on behalf of the Jewish people. It's Rabbi Klatt, Rabbi Sachs signing off. If you wish to see other classes by on the Chai Academy, thechaiacademy.com/academy or youtube.com. Type in Chai Academy, and I highly recommend the course we just finished, the Holocaust course, which takes you from the beginning, pre-Holocaust, until post-Holocaust. God bless.